Now, as you know, we talk about immigration a lot on this show, not on the cultural aspects. That's sort of the easy clickbait that can exist for other conversations here. This is simply about the number of people we have in the country and whether we have got the stuff to actually support it. Remember, 30 years ago, 18 million people. 30 years later, so from 1995 to 2025, it's now what? Almost 30 million, 27, 28 million. Roll forward another 30 years. Well, guess what? We are around 2050 going to be close to 45 to 50 million people. Does anyone think we've got the current roads to deal with 30 million, let alone future roads, future suburbs, let alone the changes to everything from water infrastructure to public transport, all the rest of it? Hence why we discuss this matter the way that we currently do. But also, we talk about it because it is where the majority of Australians are. Now, it doesn't matter what the poll and what the headline says, it says it over and over again. The majority of Australians think that there are too many people being able to come into the country, not because they have a great fear of foreigners, but because they know currently when they call 000, what happens? When they're in the back of an ambulance, what happens? When they're lining up for a queue or sitting on a toll road, what happens? Now, again, I repeat, it wasn't just one, it's multiple organisations which have found the same thing. You go from the Daily Telegraph to the Sydney Morning Herald, just looking at the Sydney of things. When people are asked about migration, how the government is handling things, most people not happy. Why? Because on this poll, 49% of people say that the current numbers are too high. So with the undecided, you just need 1% of the 18% undecided, and then bang, you're bang on 50-50. Two of them, you are at the majority. That is where the majority of Australians are. Remember, when we look at polls, we always split the undecided 50-50, half go to yes, half go to no. That would make this pretty clear that Australians have their issues at the moment with migration. But you are not allowed to discuss. The old playbook, which was used on Peter Dutton, is now being used on Susan Lee as the opposition leader. She too is starting to move in the area, suggesting that, yeah, we do have to maybe think about chopping maybe as many as 100,000 people off the list that Labor has currently been bringing in at near record levels. Why? Because there aren't enough houses right now for the current population, let alone a future one. The strain that eventually it puts on the health system as, inevitably, everyone gets older, and the problems with schools. Put simply, 30 years ago, the school that I went to had 1,000 students. Same school, no major improvements, has now got 1,500 people in it. Well, I'm talking about a good old-fashioned normal public school, high school, in fact. In fact, this is what Susan Lee has had to say about previewing her next move, which is to align with those of us who believe migration is too high.
The migration numbers into Australia are far too high. And Labor has got this all wrong. We have to have a balance between infrastructure and people coming to Australia. We have to recognise, as every community we speak to does, that the pressures on communities, whether it be housing, whether it be roads, whether it be public transport, schools, hospitals, those pressures are out of balance with migration.
And just as the bulk of the media believe that any conversation around the reduction of the target of net zero or walking away from it, even though they still are committed to climate action, even though they still say they're going to want to bring emissions down in 1% of the world's problem, this will be electoral suicide. Another smoke signal was put up again by the same types of people. And again, there is some evidence that this might be a little bit wobbly. It's all about how you have the argument. I disagreed with the Andrew Hastie line about being strangers in your own country. That's stuff that just is not going to play in the myriad of multicultural seats that now exist, particularly around Sydney and Melbourne. But again, the warning is there. By the way, news poll suggesting Susan Lee no longer the most popular person to be leading the opposition. We'll get to that in a moment or two's time. But on all of this, enter the Godfather, Don Farrell, Senator from South Australia, power broker, trade minister, special minister of state. If he doesn't want it to happen, it doesn't happen, largely inside this government. Arguably second most powerful person after the Prime Minister because, as profiles have told us, this bloke knows everything about every office in every part of the Labor side of Parliament. He says that matters to do with immigration should be bipartisan, warning against getting involved in the conversation of the cut to migration. Now, remember, I've said it 1,000 times why I focus on the topic, but again, just as the Labor Party is trying to pretend that by not having a net zero target for 2050, somehow the Libs don't believe in climate change, despite the fact they still do, and are promising to continue to bring down emissions, As they lied during the election about cuts to Medicare that were nowhere to be seen, is this the beginning of a third big lie that will be shoved down our throats?
I'd be disappointed if they headed in that direction. Immigration is important for the future of this country. It should be a bipartisan issue.
Now, as we know, the current Prime Minister is the greatest of all time. He will be the leader for as long as he chooses to, and we are simply lucky enough to be paying tax in his world. But every now and then, the reality of the Australia that he leads is slightly different than the one that he promised us, like this in opposition.
The truth is that we're an open, transparent party. There needs to be complete transparency. What we need is a Prime Minister who's prepared to be transparent, a more honest and transparent government going forward. Who will make it transparent? We're being transparent.
You get the point. But as I've shown you many times, the reality of Australia right now, and particularly Parliament House, is that it is sort of becoming Albo's chamber of secrets, where a lot of things are redacted, a lot of things are not allowed to be seen. A lot of things get flushed down the toot for no one to ever know until long after the Prime Minister has been there.